We'll go next to Trace with Knightline.
Yeah, thank you, Coach. Your offense has struggled with some issues regarding consistency. What do you think you have to do against UCF's high-flying defense to get off on a good start Saturday?
We got to be able to move the ball around. We got to be able to get the ball into the guys that can make plays' hands, and I think that's where defenses do a good job. They say, okay, we're gonna take this guy. We're gonna try to make sure that they have to beat us with this guy, and for us to have the ability, our probably most productive and most electric guy has been Mike Boone, and Mike hasn't been available for us in a couple of weeks, and so it's made it a little bit more difficult for us. So hopefully, we'll be able to get Mike back and get him back where he's healthy enough to be able to generate some of that momentum and energy. And any team that's got to play from behind, any team that's got to play off of the negative stuff, which is going to happen. You try to pride yourself in your program on toughness and the way you work and the things like that. But at some point in time, you got to have some of those positives that you can get your stadium going, you can get your fans going, you can get that momentum going. Obviously, you're a hell of a lot better team when you can.
Back on your defense, what do you think your assets are in trying to stop UCF's offense?
We got to be able to control the line of scrimmage, and I think that's where the thing starts. We know the ball's going to be in space. We know that they got athletes. If you can't at least have the ability to control the line of scrimmage and win up front, especially some of those one-on-one battles, it makes it very difficult because you got to play 11-on-11 football because the quarterback's a viable option at all times. And for us to be able to do that and for us to be able to set edges, so that we can run the ball down, we can run inside out because of the speed they got. If you don't set an edge, it's going to be very difficult.
5 questions with an insider, getting to know this week's opponent.
UCF's next opponent is the Cincinnati Bearcats, now 2-3 and losers over the weekend, 38-21 to Marshall. Let's learn more about Cincy with Chad Brendel, owner and publisher of BearcatJournal.com and the 24/7 Sports Network. Chad, thanks so much for joining us on Knightline.
Hey, fellas, how you doing?
Doing good. Now tell us more about Cincy's loss to Marshall. From my perspective, seems a bit of a setback as the halfway mark in the season approaches for the Bearcats.
Well, they've had a problem offensively getting into a rhythm. It's been evident throughout the first 4 games. I mean, if you look, that Michigan game, they get a lot of credit for playing Michigan tough, but they were down 14-0 in that. They were down early against Miami of Ohio. They were down 14-0 again against Navy last week. And this week it just kind of compounded itself. They're down 10-0 late in the second half. Marshall goes on a touchdown drive, and then they fumble the kickoff, and Marshall scores on the next play. Next thing you know, 10-0 is 24-0 in 90 seconds. And, offensively they went the first 5 offensive drives of the game, they gained 26 yards. And they went 3 and out 4 times and had 1 first down on the other drive. So if this team doesn't find a way to get going offensively early to keep themselves from falling in, 10, 14, 24-point holes, they're going to have a really long season. They've got to figure that out fast.
Quarterback Hayden Moore has thrown 9 touchdowns against 4 interceptions, completing just half of his passes. Tell us a little bit more about Moore and his receiving targets.
Well, I think they're a little bit they're lacking a little bit at receiver right now in terms of depth of talent. They have a couple guys in Devin Gray and Khalil Lewis that are proven, that are known commodities. They're still searching for some more help in that area, and they don't really have, a speed guy on the outside that's going to take the top off the defense, which I think, causes the offense some problems because they're playing, in a 15-yard box a lot of times, and college defenses generally tend to figure that out. As for Hayden, I mean, it's been the story that I talked about earlier. When he is playing well and is in rhythm and is spreading the ball around, the offense moves really well. When he's not, and when he's struggling to connect with his targets, it's a lot of 3 and outs. It's putting the defense on the field a lot. Yesterday it was 25 minutes to 5 minutes in time of possession at halftime. And that's, like I said, the offense going 3 and out on 4 of their first 5 drives. So with Hayden, it's a rhythm thing. They're just struggling to get into that rhythm. Once they get there, they're okay. But if it takes you 28 minutes to get there, you're not in good shape by the time that 28-minute runs up.
Well, what may be able to help you is the running game. Of course, 5 rushing touchdowns through 5 games. Talk a bit about the running game and the O-line play, if you would.
The offensive line is it's an interesting unit. They have 3 guys that were former walk-ons starting, and then their 2 tackles. One is a transfer from Ohio State. One is a guy he's in his 5th year at Cincinnati. They take a lot of heat because they've struggled to get some push at times. When they do, Cincinnati's got a senior in Mike Boone, who Central Florida fans have, I'm sure, heard of before, that has had a really good career. And then they've got 2 young guys, 2 freshmen, and Jared Dokes and Mike Warren. The 2 young guys have been really, really good of late when they've gotten an opportunity. But again, it's getting into that rhythm early and getting those running backs going. And through those first 5 drives on offense against Marshall, they had, I think, between the running back group, they had, I think, 4 yards rushing through the first 5 drives. So, and they ended up over 100 yards rushing, and the numbers look good, and everything looks okay. But if you really dig deeper into it, the running backs and the offensive line are just as guilty as Hayden Moore in not performing early in football games.
Cincinnati has given up 80 points in the last 2 losses to Navy and Marshall. What's going on with the defense?
Well, Navy, the triple option can just eat you alive, and I think there were some assignment issues. Unfortunately, their linebacker that was best suited to play against the triple option, and Perry Young, was suspended for the first half. And Navy went outside and went right at, he would have been the guy that would have been responsible for the pitch man and the flex bone triple option. He wasn't there. They moved a safety down into his spot, and Navy just picked on that particular matchup throughout the entire first half. I don't know that you can take much from that game unless Central Florida is switching to the triple option this week. But, against Marshall, it really 14 points on special teams. They fumbled a punt, they fumbled a kickoff, and gave the ball to Marshall deep in Cincinnati territory on both of those plays. The defense wasn't bad against Marshall. They were just on the field way too much. And until that changes, you're going to see a defense that, they can fight. And like I said, they had held Marshall to 10 points, with 5 minutes left in the second half, or the second quarter, and then they gave up a touchdown and then the fumble on the kickoff, and it makes it 24 when they had actually played pretty well, but the score doesn't necessarily indicate that. So defensively, I think they've been pretty good this year. It's just a matter of flipping time of possession and not allowing teams to dominate them in that area and leave the defense out on the field, 85% of the first half like they did this time around.
Sounds like a work in progress. What's the fan base's reaction to new head coach Luke Fickell, the former Ohio State defensive coordinator who replaced Tommy Tuberville? And did Tuberville essentially leave the cupboard bare, or is there some things for him to work with?
It's a little bit of both. I don't necessarily think that the cupboard's bare. I just think there are holes that need to be filled that are going to take some time to fill, especially on the offensive side of the football. Defensively, I think there's a pretty good base of talent there. The strength of the team is the defensive line, I think. They've got some guys that can really play on that unit. They're strong at linebacker with a guy named Jalen Miner at middle linebacker, and then Perry Young, like I mentioned before. The secondary is, I would say, average. They're prone to some big plays here and there, but you've got 2 veteran guys on the outside, and Carter Jacobs and Lyndon Stevens and Grant Coleman at corner that are seniors, and then another senior at safety and Carter Jacobs. So they've got some experience back there. Teams have been able to pick on them a little bit, but it hasn't been, a sieve like last year's Cincinnati defense was at times. There's talent to work with. I think Fickell just needs time to implement his system. I think there's also a learning curve for a guy that's a first-year head coach. And also, adjusting to bring in a new staff that hasn't worked together before. So I think the fan base is for the most part, pretty understanding that because of the situation that was left to him, it's going to take a little bit of time. And I think the biggest thing, if you remember watching Cincinnati last year, if there was any adversity, they just kind of threw in the towel and said, maybe next week, and they'd be in a game at halftime and they'd go down, 10 points early in the second half. And the next thing you know, it would be 42-14, and you're wondering what in the heck happened. And you're not seeing that with this team. You're seeing this team fight, and you're seeing the culture of the program change. There's just a very small margin for error, and they're making too many mistakes, too many mental errors to overcome that. You're just not, in the past when you had the Brian Kelly and Butch Jones years, they had so much talent that they were able to overcome that and erase a deficit or make a big comeback. Right now, they're not in position to do that. They've got to perform better on the small things inside the game in order to give themselves a chance. If they can get that stuff ironed out, I think they can be a tough out down the stretch for the rest of this season. But we haven't seen it yet, and the Marshall game was just kind of an alarming shock to the system because they failed to do so many of the little things that they need to do to win.
Well, you know that we've been through some rebuilding at UCF. You know that we've had a couple years that we're down. We're just finally reaping the benefits of Scott Frost being the head coach here at Central Florida. So we've definitely been there, and things will definitely get better. We're finally, 0-12 a couple of years ago, 6-7 last year, and now, we're finally back in the top 25 this week in both polls.
Yeah, so it's a process. I mean, Scott Frost, I'm sure, looked at things last year and he realized he had a lot to fix, and you have to give those guys time to get their guys in place, to get some, even just a little bit of their recruiting stuff put into motion and start adjusting their roster to the type of team they want to be. And you're seeing that work out with Central Florida, and I think it's in the pipeline for Cincinnati. They're just in the difficult part of that process right now.
Absolutely. Chad, tell us a little bit more about your BearcatJournal.com and where you can be found on social media and stuff like that.
You can find me at Chad Brendel on social media, at Bearcat Journal. We cover the team extensively, football, basketball, baseball for 247sports.com. We've got all kinds of stuff. We do a weekly podcast. We've got some great video content, some great writers that produce stuff for us every week. We've in the midst right now, Cincinnati, this is a crazy number. Cincinnati had over 320 recruits at the Marshall game. So a lot of coverage on that, a lot of 2019 kids that were on campus, especially from, Ohio and in the greater Cincinnati region that were checking out the game. We'll have reaction from that on the site, and appreciate you guys having us on.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.